Now, the reason why I set the society up is because I'd been in business a long time. I've lived quite an adventurous life. And I discovered throughout the travails and troubles that I've experienced myself, the one thing that was the mainstay that kept me afloat when things were really desperate was the fact that as a child and onward into maturity, I read books. I discovered that people had lived similar lives, had their own travails, had to overcome their own problems. And it helped. And the other thing is, in the writing, there is a joy in the creativity that I wanted to pass on to others. The old man sits in his rocking chair, staring out from his front porch upon the busy vista of the hot, dusty street. Wearing his Confederate jacket, his one hand resting upon a small table, grasping a large glass of julep minty sweet. Buzzing flies sip salty beads of sweat from a face shaded by a cavalry hat and the rim of the sugary sweet glass. Pedestrians greet the familiar figure of the Colonel, whilst others wave from the horse-drawn buggies as they pass. The garden's sweet oleander perfume lingers and lies heavy in the warm air, almost masking a sicklier, sweet smell. The grandfather clock was silent. Its tick-tocking usually permeated the porch with its loud rhythm and hourly chiming bell. A frog jumps up upon the table, voicing a loud, quizzical nidip at the strangely still figure before leaping away. The Colonel, unmoved, continued to stare out with unseeing eyes at the gathering dusk heralding the dying of the day.
Yeah, well, I've been writing poetry since I was a young lad, but in sort of real serious essence, I was sort of started writing a lot of poetry when just after my father passed away, unfortunately, about 10 years ago.
I'm left-handed, you see, and my mum and dad, they made a big thing of it. So I suppose I started writing to gain attention.
There's mist between the rocks, and it makes it hard to see what's beneath the shores and what's waiting there for me. It's hard to tell between the water and the sea. One is full of rocky doors, and one is waiting there for me. The wind is moving water, causing mist between the rocks, too hard to see the rocky floors or what's waiting there for me.
Well, I started writing, according to my mum, when I was quite young, actually. She always used to say I used to write a lot of poems and bring poems home from school.
Well, the trouble with the libraries at the moment is the lack of funding, and unfortunately the future seems to me to be that funding's going to get less. We're trying to help the libraries, we're trying to get bums on the seats, trying to give some value to keeping the libraries open in the evenings for people to be able to go to. But of course, it's up to the people as well. We can do our bit, but if people don't come, what can we do?
Well, I run writing groups, for two reasons. One is because I believe in sharing the craft and helping others. And two is the writing group in particular that I run at Oldbury Library. I run that there, not only for the writer's sake, but for the library's sake as well, to help raise the profile, if you like, of the libraries.
Yeah, I sort of love the musicality of Dylan Thomas's work. It's something that sort of I feel that he sort of resonated with a lot of nature, the sounds, the waves, the sea, the leaves rustling, the poetry, the alliteration, the sounds of the poetry, the way he read his work, and obviously he was one of the first real poetry celebrities of his time.
When I first started writing, I was inspired by the fact that I hoped people would enjoy it. I was inspired by the fact that writing poems seemed to be a way of expressing myself. I enjoyed that.
There's not many writing societies about. A society is an umbrella that takes on board all the other groups, where expertise is there for the less experienced within groups to come forward and for groups to be nourished.
I've not exactly lived a privileged life, if you like. I have been homeless. I know what it feels like to live off the streets. My family, they broke up when I was very young. I've been the victim of vicious crimes, and I just believe that if I can be strong enough as a person to get through those kind of emotional battles, then I think it's up to people like me that should really help out to reach others.
14, which I've written recently, and it's been very excitingly turned into a short film about First World War and the home front and the battlefronts in Staffordshire, from Staffordshire, and the perspective of a family based in Salt is something that is a tremendous sense of pride for myself.
My greatest achievement in writing so far is that I recently self-published my own book of poetry. It's entitled Beer Froth, and it's available to buy online. And that came as a result of a lot of hard work, a lot of inspiration, and a lot of support from Walsall Poetry Society. So there's a lot of blood, sweat, love and tears in that book.
had people who have written for years, closet writers, if you like, and they've come out. We've got them out. We've got them performing where they wouldn't perform. And the wonderful thing is that a couple of our members have also been published, and that's a joy to them.
Oh gosh, in my quest as poet, as a poet, as a man, I think it's sort of a sense of self-discovery. I think a lot of writers, a lot of poets write for their own reasons, not always something that they can sense, self-explain, but for me it comes from a form of spirituality.
When I first started, I was searching for an audience. Now I've found an audience. I think I'm searching for recognition for what I do.
Yeah, apart from anything else, going back to what you said, it's a great way to just organise your stuff and get it all together, isn't it?
Oh, the other thing about old poetry,
I was sleeping rough for a while. The cousin of a friend of mine, he helped me get into the YMCA, and whilst I was in the YMCA, I was mixing in with the wrong crowd, if you like. But they were the only people that was there for me. You know, I know that it's kind of hard to explain to some people. It's not a lot of people won't understand these. But they were the only people that understood my situation because they were technically in the same boat. So we was all good friends, or so I thought. And the one day, I was lying in my room. It must have been about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd forgotten to lock my door. And a friend of mine that lived on the second floor, I was on the fourth, came up, shouting at the top of her voice. She'd had a bit to drink. "Come on, Angela, come on, you got to come downstairs. I've got some friends downstairs for you to meet." And I was like, "Okay, all right, fine, whatever." You know, at the time, young, free, single, I didn't care. So I thought, okay, this might be fun. So I went downstairs and met them all. And we all ended up going for a drive, and it was during that drive that we stopped, we went to Kingva, and it was there that I was viciously attacked.
and I think 11 or 12 is a reasonable size font. Books
Mm.
You've seen it in the book, are always a problem. I think it's a good thing to get published, as long as you realise that being published is not the be-all and end-all of the game. You know, as I said before, it's a grain in a granary. You know, you can get your book published, but you've got to get people to read it. That means you have to market it. Don't expect people to market it for you. And of course, because the major publishers are pretty much now, to paraphrase it, a closed book. They've lost money, they've become money conscious more and more, so they're going for specifics, whereas writers are not specifics. There's talent that isn't necessarily falling within the remit, and most certainly poetry.
Do I write poetry to become successful? I think, in all honesty, I think everybody. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's not the driving force for me to become successful. Although, obviously, that is something that everybody wishes for in their own way, but it's not necessarily a sort of fame. It's not a sort of out and out shallow form of fame that I'm sort of searching for. It's something else. I actually, the main motivation for me to write poetry is to sort of, if you like, to put myself on the page and to be read.
No, I've never written to become successful. I've written because I want to enjoy it. I've written because I hope people enjoy it. I've self-published a book. It will make no money, but I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy the smiles and the comments that people get when they buy the book. I mean, I give more books away than I sell, and that's just simply, that's why.
But you know, if you put them on your poetry site as well,
Well, as you can understand, this is hard for me to talk about because it's not something that I ever talk about to anyone, and to talk about this, you know, on camera, it's a bit of hard going. But you know, if it helps others, then I will. When we got to Kinver, we stopped on this old country road, and on the edge of this old country road was some fields. Now, being 18, young, naive, you know, everybody has this attitude of, it never happened to me, you know, but it does. And that's where you've got to keep your eyes open, because it does. And if you're not careful, it will. Well, I was talking to this person whose name I'm not going to say because I, you know, don't want no repercussions. And we walked down this country road and we stopped. We walked into a field and we sat down and we just talked for a while. And I thought that was okay, you know. And then all of a sudden he turned and dragged me into the field. And that's where I was raped. When it was all over, I suppose survival kind of kicked in. I had two choices. I could either run and hide, and doing that, I knew that they would come after me and my life would be in even more danger to what it already was. Remember, there's 4 or 5 people there, and you know, they would have known what had happened because the ones that wasn't there during would have heard my screams, so they would have known what happened. So I had a choice. I could either run and hide and try and find a way to find a police station in a place that I'd never been to before, or I could just not do anything, jump back in the car with them and go home and pretend it didn't happen. So I did that, just to get back home, just to get back into the safety of my room. The next day, of course, I was a complete mess, complete wreck. And a lady, an Asian lady that lived on the 3rd floor, she's a very good friend of mine, she's probably my best friend at the time. She came and knocked on my door, as we always did, you know, quite often, just knocking on each other's door, come in for a chat, cuppa, you know, that sort of thing. And she seen me and she said, she took one look at me and she says, "Ange, what's wrong?" So of course I told her everything. I couldn't keep it in, not something like that. But I wasn't going to tell the police. I was petrified of telling the police. And she says that you've got to tell somebody. And I says, I can't say a word to anyone. I said, nobody would believe me anyway. And she says, you'd be surprised, you've got to talk to somebody, because if you don't, it could happen again. He could do it again to somebody else. And I said, at the time, I says, okay, I says, I'll talk to somebody here, but I'm not telling the police. So the lady that run the place, I think her name was Anita, I can't quite remember now, it was a long time ago. She came up to the room. Both of the councillors came up to the room, and she said it's YMCA policy that if anything like that happens, you have to tell the police, otherwise you'll be out on the street again. So I didn't have a choice. I had to tell the police. The police came. They put me in a safe house for a week while they was waiting for this person to be caught. Because at this time they honestly thought that my life was in danger, and I did too, to be honest with you. And just before I went into the safe house, they took my clothes, they examined me for DNA evidence, and they took me to the place where it happened, took photographs of me and took photographs to the place where it happened. They wanted to. They knew I was telling the truth because they could see quite plainly where the grass had been kicked down, you know, and they knew that it had happened. They knew I was telling the truth. But they found him. They put him on remand. Unfortunately, he got off due to lack of evidence.
She's never heard the dance of hell, the whistle before we dash over the top, the final whistles of mortar falling as you dive into blackness, into the void. Men, some my friends, poised on fire steps never to move again. Machine guns mowing them down, cutting their heads like flowers, slashing their torsos as a blade through blades of grass. Men bleeding like poppies, some frozen in searchlights, paralysed in body and mind, screaming upon barbed wire, scrambled dancing with death, some begging with bowels hanging out and stuffing gone. You say I've got no guts, young woman unknown. To me a coward comes in other forms. She didn't smell the rancour of phlegm-fizzing mists, plumes that burn your throat and lungs, the rancid clouds that left mates choked and stiff as they drowned, stumbling through the smoke. She didn't taste the bitter mud as I fell in numbness, my face blinded, one eye in darkness to sense death. She hasn't felt the weight of expectation, the burden of carrying your brother to his grave. Thankfully, she hasn't touched the darkest side. I hope that she never does.
We have to look within ourselves and find our centre. It doesn't matter if what you find isn't necessarily what you would wish you were, but you've got to be able to find your centre, and then you've got to be able to express it and pass that learning on to other people. And that's where your esteem comes from. That's where your truth comes from. And if you don't have truth in your life, you'll never have esteem.
I think the first aim is to probably spread knowledge of poetry and how poetry can be good entertainment and good fun and something that people could all enjoy throughout Walsall.
I think the role of the Poetry Society will be to just bring people together, like-minded people, poets who are already poets, people that want to be poets but don't know where to start, people that just want to be among people like us. So I think that it's got a good future.
I think intrinsically we want to try and get into people's hearts and minds and encourage everyone, not just the well-known poets or the established poets in the area, but the actual grassroots area, the kids in school who think they can't write poetry, but they've actually got quite a bit of poetry inside them. I want to encourage that and inspire that. I think Walsall Poetry Society will succeed in doing that, but it needs also, to, as I say, to get into common empathy with the hearts and minds of the local populace.
Well, this is a great problem. You see, people aren't born with closed minds. It's developed, and I think sometimes it's passed on from father to son, and onward and ever onward. And how do you break this terrible cycle? And I think it's particularly true of this area, and it's particularly true of the depressed areas. And how do you break it? Well, I think the way you can break it is getting to the youth, getting to the young ones, getting to before their minds actually get closed.
I think they respond very well, to be honest with you. I mean, I've read poetry in Walsall. I attended an event at Walsall Library, and that was quite well attended. I think they probably respond like anybody would. If you were just to walk up to a random stranger and say, "Do you like poetry?" you would probably get a very mixed response. You might even get a negative response. But, if you target events at people in Walsall, lay on poetry, lay on open mics, people will come, and people have stopped me and said, "I didn't know Walsall did this sort of thing. I really enjoyed it."
No, it'd be nice if it did. That's one of the reasons why I do writing groups. It's one of the reasons why I'm a poet. It's one of the reasons why I am so involved in the Walsall Poetry Society. It's unfortunate, but I think that when it comes to the poorer of society, it all boils down to attitude. And the majority of people that are poor, quite rightly, they need to concentrate on money to look after themselves, to look after their families. Things like writing, reading, that's, by the wayside.
I'm writing this poem while on the bus, disturbing commuters and creating a fuss. I'm writing this poem while sitting at work, ignoring my in-tray, its contents I share. I'm writing this poem perched on the throne, using blue paper if I run out of my own. I'm writing this poem even while asleep. I dream more verses onto pillows and sheets. I've been writing this poem all of my life. Everyone's left me, even my wife. I'm still writing this poem, just ignore the knocking. I can't stop now, even in my coffin.
I think poetry is very important because it actually has been proven now by scientists to open up certain parts or activate certain parts of the mind, the brain. There's parts of the brain that we don't even understand yet. Some use them more than others. But I think poetry itself is specific because it encourages everyone to think outside the box.
I think it's imperative to widen the appeal of poetry in any area. Walsall is, I wouldn't say it's the poorest of areas, but I wouldn't say probably, and I don't know if I'm kicking myself in the shin here or not, but I wouldn't say it's the most cultural of areas either.
Wow, that's like asking someone what is art, or um, it's it's a spoken word that isn't music, isn't art. It's difficult to put it in a box, but if it's written down, perhaps if it rhymes, perhaps if it just makes sense as you go through it, it's like if you say what is art, that's always to me like that's like a physical installation. It's like a picture perhaps or a statue. Poetry is like art, but you sculpt words.
So, why create this society when the societies, and some of them are bigger and better known and subsidised in Birmingham, as an example? Well, they're not here.